Hello, once more, and welcome back to the channel. Back here on YouTube, doing my Week 10 Big Ten prediction video series. You're back on this Thursday. After going 4-1 in Week 9, my record improves to 65-11 overall on the year. This week, though, going into Week 10, we have a full slate, 7 games in this weekend's matchups. Starting out with the games on all games on Saturday this week. Surprisingly, looking at this game, I don't care about that note. Sorry about that. Looking at this matchup, there's 7 games. A lot of teams, I think, they'll be favored to go on the road and win this week. So with that being said, let's get into Week 10 and a Week 10 Big Ten prediction video series. Let's get started, everyone, and see how we do this week in Week 10. Starting out with our first game coming up here on Saturday, Nebraska going on the road to Michigan State. Last week I picked Nebraska over Purdue, and Nebraska didn't disappoint. They won 31-14. The week prior I picked them against Northwestern. They won 17-9. This week they have to go to Michigan State and play. Michigan State, though, is having a down year. Last week they lost to Minnesota 27-12. Going into this week for Michigan State and Nebraska, I think, will be favored to go on the road and win in East Lansing. So with that being said, I'm going to take Michigan State to go on the road and win big going into Week 10. As that's the first game of the week. Taking Nebraska to stay in the Big Ten West race with a win. Moving on to our next matchup in the Big Ten. This time around we have to go, we're going to stick in the Big Ten East. We're going to go to New Jersey, Piscataway, birthplace of college football, Ohio State, Rutgers matchup. Unbeaten Ohio State hasn't lost yet. Last week I picked Ohio State to win against Wisconsin. They won 24-10, of course. This week going on the road to Rutgers. Rutgers coming off bye week, it looks. And I picked 2 weeks ago, I picked Rutgers to get the win and to beat Indiana, coming off bye week to play Ohio State at home. Ohio State comes in unbeaten. This is another matchup I like. The road team and Ohio State to get a win. Ohio State looks like they've been playing good football this year, even though there's been some situations where Ohio State's been in some close games. They had a lot of, early on in the season, they had a lot of games where they escaped and ran away with wins. But looking at the matchups, I like Ohio State going on the road to Rutgers to get their win and remain unbeaten this week. So I'm taking the Buckeyes this week as a road team. Like I said, it's a road heavy this week for quite a few teams to look at, and the first 3 games are no exception. Once we get to the bottom half of the week, the second half of the week, we're going to have some situations where it's going to be hard to make picks. So, taking Ohio State on the road at Rutgers this week, going on into it in the Big Ten East battle. Moving on. Bloomington, Indiana, Wisconsin, coming off loss. Going into Bloomington, Indiana this week in the Big Ten matchup. If you look at it, Indiana coming off a 33-24 loss to Penn State. Well, Wisconsin's coming off a loss as well, by the way. Wisconsin coming off to a 24-10 loss to Ohio State. Indiana, last time I haven't, have I picked Indiana to win a game this year? Oh. I need to look back at this. Have I picked Indiana? Not really. So unfortunately, I've not picked Indiana at all to win a game this year. And I'm gonna take Wisconsin this week going into this matchup. If I look at it, I think I've only picked Indiana maybe once. Huh. I'm looking at the schedules, seeing if okay, I only picked Indiana once. That was in week 2 when they played Indiana State. This week, I think Wisconsin, I think they're going to come off a 24-10 loss to Ohio State. I think they come off that 24-10 loss, go on the road, get a win this week at Indiana, because Indiana, unfortunately, I think, after losing to Penn State last week, losing the previous week to Rutgers, I think Wisconsin, coming off loss, I think Wisconsin's going to get a win and stay in the Big Ten West race this week as well, just like Nebraska. Setting up the Big Ten West the next 3 weeks after this week through the next week 13. It's going to be really interesting to see. And the Big Ten West is going to be a 4-team race between Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Minnesota. The 4 teams at the top. It's going to be hard to decide who gets the win, but Wisconsin is going to get an easy win this week against Indiana, I think, on a Saturday afternoon. Moving on to our next game. I'm going to stay in the Big Ten West for this matchup. Minnesota is going to be careful about that. It's going to be hosting Illinois. I threw the helmet at the screen. Unfortunately, that's what you heard in the background noise. So Minnesota and Illinois this week. Minnesota, this is the first game, I think, where the home team has a chance to get a win. Illinois, the last time around, said they were going to have a close game against Wisconsin. They ended up losing 25-21. Game I predicted Wisconsin to win. Illinois against Minnesota this week should be one of those matchups in the Big Ten where I think Illinois is going to have to go on the road. They're going to have to play better this week. They're going to have to play real well. They don't want to stay in this game the whole majority of it. But unfortunately, I think Minnesota, they're coming off 2 straight wins. And last week they scored 27 over Michigan State and gave up 12. And the week before that they gave up 10. So they gave up under 20 points the last 2 games Minnesota has. I think Minnesota can do that again this week, but I don't know if they're going to give up. I don't know if they're going to give up more. They might give up more than 10 this week, but I think Minnesota sticks around and gets a big win against Illinois on Saturday afternoon. So taking Minnesota, that's the first home team we're taking this week in the Big Ten predictions for week number 10. Moving on to our next matchup, staying in Big Ten West. Staying in the Big Ten West for this next matchup. Iowa having to travel to Chicago to play Northwestern at historic Wrigley Field coming up on Saturday afternoon, which should be an interesting game to see. And this game is one of those games where the overrun, the scoreline is set at 29.5 between the 2 teams. And I can see why, because last time around Iowa scored a touchdown on field goal against Minnesota and lost 12-10, gave up 4 field goals. And if Iowa plays the same way again, their defense is going to get hurt this week. And that's what's happened the last few weeks, the last couple weeks this year, this whole season for Iowa overall. Their defense has had to bail them out. I don't know how much longer Iowa's defense is going to be able to keep this up and bail them out. And going against this Northwestern, they've come off games where they've played pretty good. And last week, Northwestern upset Maryland, a game I thought Maryland would win. And going into this week, this pretty much is a game that sets up Northwestern potentially to maybe earn a spot, maybe get a chance at making a bowl game if they can make a run near the end of the season. But this week going in, I think Iowa will bounce back from a 12-10 loss coming off a bye week. I think Iowa's going to get the job done. I'm not sure how it's going to happen, but I think Iowa gets the job done in some way, in some form. Not sure how, but taking Iowa on the road against Northwestern at historic Wrigley Field coming up. That being said, we're moving on to our next game. Going back to the Big Ten East matchup. A late afternoon game between Maryland, of course, and Penn State. Penn State coming into this matchup with a loss. Yep, Penn State coming in off a loss, 20-12 against Ohio State. They were 2 weeks ago, and then coming in off a win last week as well, 33-24 when they beat Indiana. So Penn State in the last 2 games, 1-1 over the last 2 weeks. And since they lost to 20-12 in Ohio State, they scored 33 last week against Indiana, but they still give up 24 points. That's the issue, I think. That's the issue Penn State had last week. If you look at it overall, Penn State, their last game was week 7 when they didn't give up any points. They gave up 0 to UMass and scored 63 back in week 7. Last 2 weeks alone, they gave up 44 points. And that has to stop in this matchup. I think Penn State's going to avoid giving up more than... They might give up 20 again this week, but are they going to get a win? Yes, I think Penn State will get a key win this week. And unfortunately, Maryland's going to lose their fourth game of this season, I believe. So that's what's going to happen there in that matchup, taking Penn State over Maryland on Saturday. Moving on to the last game of the night, cross-conference matchup between the Purdue Boilermakers and the Michigan Wolverines, also unbeaten. One of the two remaining unbeaten teams, Michigan against Purdue. This is another matchup with big implications in it. Michigan, I think, will remain unbeaten in this game against Purdue. Purdue last week gave up 31 to Nebraska, and they had a bye week the previous week in week 8. Purdue this week, though, coming against Michigan, I think it's going to be another matchup where Purdue gives up over 30 points this week, unfortunately, and a loss, because of Michigan, they're just way too good to beat somebody. Michigan's going to be one of those teams. It could be them and Ohio State, both unbeaten for a second straight year, going into week 12, and that's what's going to happen, unfortunately. So with that being said, I'm taking Michigan over Purdue this week. With that being said, that is the Week 10 Big Ten predictions. Here's a quick recap of who I'm taking. Starting out in East Lansing, taking Nebraska over Michigan State. After that, I'm taking Ohio State on the road at the birthplace of college football against Rutgers. In Bloomington, Indiana, I'm taking Wisconsin over Indiana. In Minneapolis, I'm taking Minnesota over Illinois. At historic Wrigley Field, I'm taking Iowa over Northwestern. In College Park, Maryland, I'm taking Penn State over Maryland. And the last game of the night, I'm taking Michigan over Purdue on Saturday night to finish us off for Week 10. That being said, that's the Week 10 Big Ten predictions. I hope you all enjoyed. And with that being said, I will see you right back here in the Week 11 Big Ten predictions right back here next Thursday. So stay tuned for that. With that being said, have a nice day. Stay safe. Peace out. And bye for now. And I will see you back here next Thursday, everyone. Bye for now. Stay safe. See you next Thursday.